Good morning, evening, day, or night, whatever time that you're having the opportunity to view this video presentation. I'm Rain of Tears, and this is the EJ3 Perspective Show. Today's session, I'm sort of entitling it, Why Ask Why? This is another one of the, I would say, an impromptu, sort of anecdotal set of questioning and thought musing. So I'll get right into it. Now, one of the things that bothers me is that in terms of like when you're driving, you know, for some reason, people feel that they have to, if someone's, just accelerates just a little bit, that for whatever reasons, people feel the need that they need to accelerate and to pass you. I mean, I know it's sort of like a minor pet peeve or an irritant, or for me, it's just a question mark. It's sort of like, that's one of my minor why, ask why. On a more serious level and a more substantial level, one thing I've noticed or I've known about my people, our people, Black American descendants of slaves, is that many times people like drama, over dramatic, just overemphasizing and over magnifying everything and just jumping on the bandwagon as opposed to having critical thoughts and taking the time to reflect upon thinking. Like, for example, there have been a few so-called controversies associated with some of the major players, so to speak, of black vloggers or whatever. And then people that I've noticed that have never had YouTube platforms before, or if they did, they had minimal input in terms of uploads, or, the uploads that they had were of a fluffy, non-political nature, more on the world star hip hop variety, but just, and I'll just go right into it. One prime example would be the recent situation with Phil and the controversy about his wife not being black. Now, one thing that irritated me is that about the situation is that, people want to say that she's like a white woman or she's a big fat woman. That woman is not white. Now, you can say, well, obviously she's a Mexican woman of Mexican extraction or whatever, but in the United States, here, no white individuals would consider Phil's wife to be white as defined in the United States. We're not talking about what, you think or whatever. I'm talking about social realities. She would not be defined as white. If she went to some white towns, some racist towns, or basically any town in America, the white people that live in those particular areas would not consider that woman to be white. She's a light complexion Hispanic. Yes, check. Okay. Even in Mexico, she would not be considered white. I mean, the reason that I know that, I don't know if people have paid attention to a previous video, indicated that I have an in-law that is of Mexican extraction, and because of that, I've had the opportunity to, get some insights that I normally would not, the average person, would not be able to get or would care wouldn't even make a difference to them. So, make a long story short, that Phil's wife would not be considered someone that would be white in Mexico. What I'll do is in a future date, I'll just, maybe post some photos or make some of my video slide presentations about what Mexicans would be considered white. White would be like the white Europeans. I'll just give a verbal example that you might see in Europe. Someone like that, like say the former president, one of the former presidents of Mexico, if people are familiar, Vicente Fox, his ancestors, some ancestors of Mexicans that live there are like their descendants are some of the Europeans that came from from Europe, England or whatever, and from Lebanon, like Salma Hayek, she's actually of Lebanese descent. She's a Mexican of Lebanese descent. So anyway, just like in America, there are people that come from different backgrounds, but we're all quote unquote Americans or whatever. So that's the situation. That's the situation in terms of the example I gave of Vicente Fox. He's obviously a white person, a white Caucasian would be considered that in the United States. Phil's wife she's really light complexion. She looks like she could, I mean, you know, if you're going to give a comparison, she would be really like a Creole type, in New Orleans type Creole or Redbone, that type, where they are not, you know, you don't consider them white. So the reason that I think, obviously, that some people that say that she, you know, that she's white because they were really angry at Phil and they just want to hammer that point. I get it. But really, that lady's not white, you know. So let's get off that. Non-black, yes. Light complexion, yes. Caucasian or white, you could say that she's heavy set. I mean, I don't use derogatory terms about people like some guy said, you know, like she's a quote unquote big fat white woman or whatever. That's wrong, whatever. But she's not. That irritates me. Why? That woman is not white. You know, she's a light complexion, mestizo type Hispanic or Mexican woman. Which leads me into a related gripe. You know, some people recently, you know, have had some issues about Tariq Nasheed and his wife, you know, Peanut, as he affectionately refers to her, you know, as her, because her mother is white or whatever. You know, they have a, you know, some people are starting to bandwagon on that, you know, and say, well, you know, because you're pro-black and you do the hidden colors things and you know, espouse many things about white supremacy or whatever. I mean, people need to mind their own business to some extent, you know, and that's just my opinion, you know, and some people think differently or whatever. I mean, the man, Tariq, I'm talking about, Mr. Tariq Nasheed, you know, he's done great work, you know, he's advocated, he's brought out a lot of very great information. You know, people can say, well, you know, you can do that themselves. But the thing is that not too many people were doing it themselves. You know, he sort of like gets the ball rolling many times on many things. You know, it's the impetus. You know, he's researched stuff. So then, you know, that gives people the curiosity to research more. You know, he's been in the forefront recently with things. So anyway, just because, you know, Peanut's mother is white, you know, she still, I believe, and genetically I believe too, that even in Africa, I'm getting tangential real quickly, we, as many people know, everybody that's the black Africans in Africa are not of the sub-Saharan type, the prototype, the West African type that many people might think that that's what all black Africans are like. It's not like that. I mean, it's sort of common sense type thing. And this is a historical thing. It's not something where, you know, some admixtures happened recently. If there were admixtures, which they probably were, like, and again, you know, like in Eastern Africa, like Somalia and Sudan, whatever. I mean, this is long-standing stuff, so you can't just make a generalized assumption and say that, okay, because this person's light complexion and they have light skin or whatever, or so-called Caucasian features, which really many times, as Phil, the hated Phil to some, has pointed out, and who's been there, I mean, they're black people, and not just in Ethiopia, that have different grades of hair or whatever, you know. So it's not just because, you know, we have this image of the roots type image of like, this is what black people are or whatever, that in Africa, that's not the case. So it's a pet peeve to just say that just because, you know, someone has a light complexion wife or whatever, that she's, and her parent might be white or whatever, that they can't do that. And what they need to do, people need to do what they want to do. You know, you can't tell somebody that, or in my opinion, that they need to go and get them a dark-skinned wife or whatever. I mean, that's nonsense. You know, you get who you fall in love with. If it's a righteous situation and it's not self-hate, I mean, you or me or anyone else is not able to judge who somebody should love and who they should be with or whatever, and that they can't speak for and do good work for the community. I thoroughly disagree with that, and I ask why people like to get in other people's business. You know, you worry about, in my opinion, people should worry about their own relationships and what they need to who they want to deal with. All right, I sort of went out on a tangent on that. Now I have another scenario in terms of like why people like to get in other people's business. You know, a lot of times, you know, there might, you know, you're out in public, you know, you might be discussing something, you know, and it's not really even stated in a manner that's really, the volume is really loud or whatever, but, you know, certain individuals will hear you know, what you're talking about, as the slang term goes, ear hustling, and they want to jump in the conversation and give their input, their, as the old expression goes, their 2 cents worth or whatever. And I don't want to generalize and say all, but many times, or most times, I would say that the individuals that do that would be of the Caucasian persuasion, you know, and they want to give a lecture and, you know, say what you shouldn't do. I mean, we've seen all the YouTube videos and things like that. But I mean, this is before the, you know, people start putting stuff on the phones or whatever. This is an ongoing thing. People want to get in people's business. It's YSY. I would say people, these Caucasians, not all, but the ones that do that, they need to get their own business, as they say. Mind your own business. Don't worry about what we're doing. Worry about your own people. Worry about the issues that's going on. So this is a, you know, off the cuff YSY segment. I'll do more. I actually am going to do a video about, I'm going to break down the so-called racial classifications and phenotypes or whatever. I'm going to do that probably sometime soon, so people can get an idea, you know, since you're going to say like who's white and who's black, and in particular with this Phil situation, that just sort of irritates me. I have a bone to pick with that. So I appreciate you listening to this little mini rant, you know, if it came in somewhat tangential. I always appreciate you stopping through. I wish everyone peace and positivity. Take care until the next time.